Welcome to the Addison Bowen podcast, where we talk about what it actually takes to hit your first six or multi-six figures in business. I'm Addison, certified clinical hypnotherapist and online business coach for entrepreneurs. And 3 years ago, I decided that nursing wasn't for me, dropped out of nursing school, and dove into the online space. From free hypnosis audios to unfiltered conversations and business advice, this is the space for you to take radical responsibility towards creating your dream business. Let's dive in. Hi guys, welcome back to the podcast. I'm super excited for today's guest expert. We have Melissa here, who is a financial consultant who walks alongside solo entrepreneurs and helps them take ownership of their money so they create financial stability. And I love hearing your bio that it says you have the gift of making money feel easy, and you're also an accredited financial consultant, but money feeling easy feels so good to my nervous system. So I'm excited to talk a little bit more about that. And you offer one-on-one financial consulting for both business owners, non-business owners, I'm assuming. So I'm just excited to learn more about budgeting and all of the things today and making money feel easy, I guess. So
Great.
Can you tell us a little bit more about you and your journey? I know you mentioned you had an uncute personal financial meltdown that I'm assuming led you to where you are today. So tell us a little bit about you and your story.
Yeah, thanks. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. So my money journey, or the moment I knew my money journey was starting, right? Like, we have money stories that we take in from childhood, but the moment I knew it was starting was after I had graduated. So I went back to get a second degree in sign language interpreting. I graduated from that, and I was a sign language interpreter from 2008 until COVID. And in my, second month of working, I got my paycheck and I was like, oh shit, this is not, I had buried myself in debt in college with credit cards, student loans, all of the things, right? And so I get out, and it's like you follow this path of do really well in school and get good grades and then go to college and then graduate and then get your job. And I had this vision of job just equaled money to take care of life. But the reality that I was looking at was job and money to take care of my life. Those two things they were not in sync at all. So I found myself in the staff lounge. I'm on this green velvety couch, and I'm sitting next to my colleague, and I'm just bawling my eyes out about how am I supposed to do this? I don't understand. The money's the math isn't mathing. And so we go down into our office where all of our other colleagues are. And luckily, one of my colleagues was kind enough to be like, maybe it's not the money, but you don't know how to manage it. And I was like, okay. So she just held this mirror to my face, and I was like, yeah, maybe I don't know how to manage it. And she was 100% right. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. My money was just floating all over the place, and where it was going into what, I just had no idea. So really from that moment, I started diving into all things, personal finance, and reading all the books and listening to podcasts and digging into all the spreadsheets. And so I got myself out of that. I dug myself out of $50,000 worth of debt, and within a couple of years was able to save $15,000 toward my wedding. And really just kind of got into a place where it's okay, my money is not managing me, right? I now can kind of see the moving pieces. So fast forward from that moment to COVID, when everything that I was doing interpreting wise just kind of vanished overnight. And a lot of people did during that great pivot was what else am I good at? And money was the answer that came through. So financial consulting really kind of took the forefront of what I was doing at that time.
That's awesome. And I like that kind of mirrors what we were talking about in this podcast too, because with your client or your coworker that mirrored this back to you. It wasn't that maybe you weren't making enough money at the time, but it also was just that you didn't know how to manage it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we had this conversation of not enoughness and how people are like, okay, well, 10K months is the bar, and then 20K months, and then 30K months. And if I make that, then I'll feel okay. And what I have learned working with so many entrepreneurs is that if they already are feeling anxiety in their finances and their money now, regardless if they're making 20K months or 5K months or 3K months, it doesn't matter if they make more, they're still going to experience those same patterns. And it's usually a mindset thing, but then also like a structural thing. A lot of people are fearful to look at their money in the way that that you just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to like that feeling of not enoughness or scarcity or whatever we want to call it, and like you said, actually having to learn how to manage their finances, like where do you start with clients so they start creating that safety?
Yeah. As you mentioned, when we just kind of like set a nebulous 10K months, right? Then, okay, that's amazing because then we've got something that we're striving toward. But then as business owners, right, the next step is, well, then 20K, then 50K, then to 100K. And if that's the direction that you want to move, like 100%, yes, please, please
Yeah.
go there. But at the same time, the place that I start with a lot of my clients is we've got to like see our numbers, not just know that they're floating out there somewhere, but like see our numbers and understand what that means for the revenue. What's the gross
Mhm.
revenue that we're bringing in? What are the expenses that are going out? Then what's left at our profit line? How much do we have to send to taxes? What are we paying ourselves in our owner's draw, right? It's not just one number that
Yeah.
leads us to say like, oh yeah, this is enough. Like it's like we have to look at all the numbers, see them, understand them, and then we can actually start setting goals to say, okay, is that enough? Is that enough for my business? Is that enough for my household? And kind of wrap our arms around like, what are the numbers telling us?
Yeah. So as a financial consultant, are those areas that you go through with your clients? Because I know I have an accountant who does my monthly bookkeeping, and she's been great because she's looked at some of those things for me, like what are you paying yourself? Obviously, this is for taxes, and I did that very early on in my business, around
Mm-hmm.
5K ish months, and that's what I recommend to my clients too, because I feel like at that point, I was looking at that money as like, wow, that's more than I've ever made in this career before, and it started to feel overwhelming because I knew there was
Mm-hmm.
more taxes. I knew there was like, I'm going to pay myself, I have rent, I have all the things, right? And so that was the time period where I was really looking to hire someone and work with someone and have someone tell me where to put my money so I didn't have to think about it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And I mean, I have to think about it because I'm the business owner. I have to look at those numbers. But
Yeah.
I'm curious if that's is that where you start with clients, where it's like, let's look at, how much your household actually needs. Let's look at what you need here. And then we go from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the beauty of, as a financial consultant, the beauty of, I encompass the entire ecosystem of your money from when it comes into the business to when it leaves your personal checking account, right? It's not just one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
They feed off of each other. It's like we have to have them in separate bank accounts, yes, of course, but the interconnectedness of it all, like that's to me kind of like where that mind fuck comes in, where it's like they're so separate, but yet
It's all in one
how
account
they
first, or it starts
play,
here.
yeah, how they play off of each other never goes away. No matter how many bank accounts and separations you have, like they still impact each other. So yes, that is indeed what I do with people, is kind of walk through what do each of these things mean? What are we striving for? What systems need to be in place? I've worked with some folks who I always ask the question like, How much are you paying yourself? And sometimes the answer is like, but it's all mine. And the reality is that's not the case, right? Like the business has some, the government has some, and we get some. So being able to kind of see the different moving pieces when it comes to our money, that's a big part of it. And then I've also worked with some people who they've had a bookkeeper or an accountant for years. I mean, I'm talking 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. And they're like, I don't know what that report means. Like I just get, it's like all the things get done. And then I get kind of like a monthly
Yeah.
summary of all of it. But like, what is that telling me? So just kind of I help people gain that confidence when it comes to understanding money and the financial literacy, and like, let's get the foundation in place so that way when you are working with your accountant or your bookkeeper or your fractional CFO, right, like you can speak the same language. You understand the questions that are coming. You can review the information to make sure that it's all being handled correctly. And it's like that. Yeah, there's financial confidence is really
Yeah.
what it boils down to, and the comfortability of money.
Yeah. No, I like that. I think that just helped me, even for myself, differentiate between the financial consulting side of things and the accounting side of things. Because I think in my head there was a little bit of a blurred line, but you're so right. It's like I get that monthly report, but then I don't have a budget. I have to do that myself, or it's separate, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so you're diving deeper in the sense of really helping people understand where every dollar is going and into what account and how it's all working together. So I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
So when it comes to, because I know, for me, when my accountant was like, well, how much do you want to pay yourself? I was like, what? Like, isn't that what you're supposed to do? And, I was able to choose that because I have an S Corp. And so I was able to choose the amount. And we kind of went back and forth and just looked at, well, how much do you want in the business versus what are your goals? And she was able to help me through that. But initially that question was really, really scary. And I'm assuming that for your entrepreneurial clients, that is something that you work through based on what they need for the household and stuff like that. So could we talk a little bit more about that? Like, how do you help someone decipher in a business that's making really, really good money, what they actually pay themselves and how that supports their life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's really fun to kind of reverse engineer when it comes to looking at what the business is going to pay out. So when we think about our household in general, right, we think whether that's one person, that's still your household, whether that's you and a significant other or you and a bunch of kiddos, whatever that looks like. But going through, and I'm not talking you've got to know every single penny, because
Yeah.
the second I talk spending plans with people, also kind of known as a budget, right? Like some people are like, ah, they just
Yeah.
stop altogether because that word in and of itself instantly feels restriction. And so oftentimes I'm like, okay, let's just toss that word out. Let's go with spending plan and look through. Again, it doesn't have to be every penny, but getting an average of what is the household, what does it take to run your household when we're looking at where we live and how much how much I go out to eat. Like that's one of the things that I value. And so we put a lot of money into that category and I spend it guilt free, and just kind of all the things that our household needs to run.
No.
What does that look like? So my recommendation is starting at least like 3 to 6 months, and we'll get it all down. We're looking at credit cards. We're diving into bank accounts, like the outflow of your household. Let's start there. So we know, and for some people, they're the breadwinner. I don't even know, is that a PC term anymore still? I'm not sure. They're the ones who provide the majority of the money to the household. And for other people, like, the household needs nothing from my business. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well then that is very different, right? Like we
Mhm.
get that's very different on what we want. So we get that information, like what is the household needing, by digging into that data, and then we reverse engineer into that. Are you looking at retirement planning? How much are you putting towards that? Then we look at taxes. How much do you need to put towards that? Does somebody else in your house have a W-2 that they run? I'm not a tax strategist. I know enough to kind of like get people in the right space. And then we talk through, are you looking at scaling, right? Are you wanting to bring somebody in? Because then your business is going to need to have more. And then once we kind of get all those pieces together, then we've got to look at it in the flow of our cash. Because if we don't know what's moving at what times, that's what kind of gets us into a pinch where it's like, ooh, I needed money for that thing, but now the money's not there. I paid myself, but I needed it for this. And so kind of looking at the actual like cash flow of the money from start to finish.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And with the conversation of not enoughness, right? Like that safety that we feel around money, do you ever run into time periods where like there is simply not enough? Like someone's, making 10K months in their business and it's not working and you have to readjust things or.
Yeah, indeed. Yes, right. The reality is sometimes there's just not enough money coming in to support what's happening. And so then we have the conversation around, is it like a short-term thing where it's like, okay, credit cards are going to be the short-term solution, or a loan to come out to be a short-term solution? Like, is that the case? Or is this something that's like systematically been an issue for a long time? And we need to really dive into the money that's going out in the household and kind of realigning it to A, what the business can actually provide, and B, what your values are. Because sometimes I'll walk through, and somebody will be like, "Cow, that $300 fitness subscription that I haven't touched in years, like I didn't realize I was still paying for that." Like, okay, great, right? That's an easy one. Cancel that, and then and so you just kind of dig through the data and then work into aligning it with what you actually value. Because if there are things that need to go or that need to be trimmed, I don't want to be trimming them from those things that bring you like that absolute most joy. Like that's got to be the last place that we look.
Yeah, I love that. I think as we're talking too, I'm just kind of thinking the blend between having, a structured plan like that or looking at your money in that way. And then also the mindset piece, because I have seen a lot of my clients that come to me that, never feels like enough and they're making 10, 15, 20, $1,000 a month. And technically they're putting money away. They're paying themselves like they are safe and okay, but it's still this, ooh, is this going to go away? Is this all fluke? Is it, those internal mindset pieces that come up? And I think that's where the reprogramming needs to be done. But I do know, for myself, having structured pieces in play in my business and knowing where the money's going and stuff, it provided a level of safety that the reprogramming never could. You know what I mean? So
yes.
I think there's such a benefit of having both of those two in play. Like, where is the mindset coming into it? And also, do you have a plan? Do you have a place where your money is going? Because if you have that, you're probably going to feel a lot safer in your income.
Yes. And to that point, everybody's threshold varies so much. When I talk about having your emergency fund, some people don't like that term, right? We call it a just in case fund or a when fund. Like having a bucket of money that you can utilize in those instances. Rule of thumb, 3 to 6 months of your household expenses into an account, right? So that's kind of what the financial world will say, but we all experienced COVID. So we know that everybody's risk aversion level is different. Some people are like, if I have 1 or 2 months in that cushion, I feel so good. My safety level, I'm at a 10 out of 10. I feel great about that. And other people are like, give me 12 months
Yeah.
of household expenses in there before I reach my 10 out of 10 safety. So that's something I really recommend to folks, is kind of play with it. And if you're like, ooh, I'm not sure, visualize a bucket of money and start with 1 month in there. And then just like gut check in your body. How does that feel? Okay, not good enough. All right, I'm going to put my second month in there and then gut check how that feels. And then get to a place where you're kind of like, okay, yeah, that's starting to feel nice, right? And then that, like, knowing that that's there and available for you, that creates so much stability, security, just like in and of itself is
Yeah.
creating that bucket. Because as entrepreneurs, the inflow, it's like riding a roller coaster, right? Like 1 month you're like, holy shit, that was a lot of money. And then the next month you're like, I didn't make any that month. And so it, like, riding that roller coaster, like, we have to put structure in place to create that like stability line. So it, like, I love to use this analogy where it like takes us from the roller coaster to like the lazy river, where I'm like, okay, yeah, things are feeling good. Somebody hand me a drink. I'm just going to chill.
Yeah. No, I love that you brought that up, because the reality of entrepreneurship is that, like one of my mentors who, I mean, she's a millionaire, right? She just bought her a multi-million-dollar home, and she was talking about how earlier this spring, or maybe it was February-ish, like she had, one of those declines, and she's like, this is a normal part of business, and this is why I set, myself up for this. And I think that not enough people talk about that. They're just like, you should be making this much and you should be doing this. But I think there are those systems in play, like the emergency fund, whatever you want to call it, that does provide that level of safety. So I really like the gut check, what feels good to me. You also mentioned budgets or spending plans and how you don't love strict budgets and spending plans. So
Yeah.
can you talk about what you mean by that? Like, let's say, I know some of the top questions that I get asked, from some of my clients, because we talk about everything behind the scenes and I'm not the expert in it. So I always send them somewhere. Now I have someone to send them to, but like, I get asked about credit card usage and like paying off debt. Should I not be spending here if I have this debt? And I get asked about like, how do I create a budget? And again, that's not my expertise. And I think it's different for everyone, but I know it would be helpful for my audience if we talked a little bit about that, because I have seen, I've read a lot of books. I've, seen all of the social media stuff about like, you should not be setting foot in a restaurant if you have credit card debt, or, and it's like, that's so restrictive. So what is your take on that?
I have to tell you, I lived and breathed that world when I went through getting out of debt for myself. And I have had to do so much unlearning, where I created just like this black and white world of it's okay to spend money here and not here. And it was so rigid. And I will never, that is not how I operate. I will never do that to anybody, because the reality is we have life to live. Period. When I was going through that, I said no to a vacation. 3 of my best friends were going on that. And 2 years later, one of those best friends died. She got breast cancer, passed away. And I still to this day am like, Melissa, that was a trip that I should have never said no to, but I did it because I was in this restrictive, can't spend any money space. The reality is we can do 2 things at the same time. We can pay down debt and we can live life at the same time. The debt payoff will just happen a little bit slower. So the way I like to look at it, when we outline everything that, like, all the credit cards, loans, when we outline what it all looks like, when we outline the APR, the interest that you're paying on that, then we put it into a spreadsheet and we say, all right, let's look at this. Here's how much interest is going to be paid over time. And let's talk through what feels acceptable to you. Like maybe there's 2 credit cards that are sitting at close to 30% and you're like, I want to hammer through those, but
Yeah.
everything else, like, that can go at a slower pace. Then kind of putting together a plan based on what feels right. There's different methods of debt repayment. One of them is looking at highest interest first, another is looking at the lowest amount first. And that can bring some really amazing psychological wins. Like maybe you have one credit card that has like $2,000 on it. And you're like, great, if I can just get this out from underneath me, then I can start handling some of the other stuff, right? So it 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 all depends again on this gut check of like what feels right when you look
Mhm.
at the data. So all that to say, is debt repayment a restrictive, don't go into a restaurant? Like my answer is hell no. Because when we treat it like that, it's like any other fad diet that we try to do, right? You're like, I'm never eating sugar again. Okay, yeah, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Like everything in moderation. It's like we've got a plan that we can follow, and it doesn't have to be this or that. It can definitely be an and.
Yeah, I love that. And it provides safety to have that plan too. So I like that
Yes.
a lot. And then
Yeah.
would you say for most people it's starting with that emergency fund first and building that safety and
You
then
know,
or can you do both at the same time?
yeah, that's a great question. So for some people, like getting 1 month in their emergency fund, great. That's exactly that's
Yeah.
exactly what's gonna get like that feeling of like, okay, now I can start to make other moves. So we'll get 1 month in there, then we'll focus on debt, and then we'll kind of figure out like then what's the balancing act to be able to still keep putting money into the emergency fund while paying down. And so it's that comfort level of what's going to be your step one, what's going to be your step two, and how does it all blend together. Another thing that a lot of people like to talk about is, um, let's say for example you're going to be investing, right? Like you're putting money away in retirement, and one of the myths that I'm out here trying to bust is you don't have to pay off all your debt before you invest in retirement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when we're thinking about the stock market, the amount of time inside the stock market is what gets us compounding interest. So the longer that gets put off, right, the less money that can compound and make you money. So when we look at that piece too, right, like it doesn't have to be
Makes
a
more
strict
sense.
yes or no. It can be a, again, I want to get rid of that 30% credit card, but I've got a couple personal loans that are sitting, in the 10%
Yeah.
range. Okay, great. Let's get some money into retirement as I'm working those down.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's all so personal too based on situation and
Yeah.
yeah, and what everything looks like. I love that you brought up retirement too. That was something that I put off for a long time. And then I saw this chart that was like, if you're this age and you put in this much per month, this is where you'll be versus waiting 10 years. And I was like, okay, that was enough. Like I gotta start.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, even though like I didn't feel ready at the time, quote unquote, or
Mhm.
whatever, like it did provide a level of safety. I was like, I have, this together and this is gonna get me to where I want to go. So I love that. So how
Yeah.
does like for you, what's your ideal client? Is someone at any point in business? Are they
Mhm.
making a certain amount of money? When do you recommend that they start working with you to provide that level of safety?
Yeah, I work with all levels of business owners. I have a getting comfy with your business finances. It's a mini series. We get together for 2 hours and then again for another 2 hours, and I get into your accounting system with you. So whether that's you wanting to set up QuickBooks, whether you want to use Wave, spreadsheets, whatever it is, but just like somebody to be like, okay, here's how this needs to be set up. Here's how the money's going to move. Here's which accounts you want to have in place. Here's what's important now. Because oftentimes we overcomplicate and then it just shuts us down for that next move. We get kind of in
Yeah.
that paralysis of like, wait a minute. I didn't get that in the right place. And so now I'm not doing anything, right? It kind of takes us into avoidance. So I have from the early entrepreneur who just needs somebody to help them get their systems like up. And then entrepreneurs who are they're like, I've been using my accounting system, but it doesn't feel like it's efficient. I just need another like second pair of eyes on this. I
Yeah.
do that too. And then for other, entrepreneurs who are further along. Now, if you have a fractional CFO and an accountant and a bookkeeper all on your team, then I typically kind of come in with the personal finance side. I can obviously still speak the financial business finance lingo, but that tends to be more on the personal side when you're really looking to kind of understand what's going on in the household. But to answer that, every stage of entrepreneur, there's some piece of the puzzle that a financial consultant can work on.
And when do you think people are typically like, hey, this is something I need to do? Because we don't want them to be so anxious about their finances. I'm assuming that, like you said, where they're just in analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
So do you have any thoughts on that? Just for my audience, if they're in that place where they're like, oh, I need retirement, I need to figure out a plan to do this, and they're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, is it like, then is the time? Should they start earlier?
Yeah. I typically ask 3 questions to start. On a scale from 1 to 5, how comfortable are you with money? So kind of giving yourself that like guidepost. Second question I ask, how confident are you in managing your skills? 1 to 5. And then thirdly, what's your relationship with money like? Is it carefree or is it like oh fuck? And giving yourself a scale there. So if in any of those categories you've got a 3, 2, or a 1, that would be a great time to bring in a financial consultant. And I do have some people who are, at a 4 and they're like, I want to get myself to a 5. I'm like, great, let's
Yeah.
dive in there. But for somebody who's like, I don't know, would now be a good time? That's where I would start. Just to ask those 3 questions. And if you give yourself a 3, 2, or a 1, that'd be like okay, let's do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I love that. Well, tell us more about your financial consulting. I know you mentioned you have that mini series, and then you probably have more, you know, consulting and high touch support too, right?
Yeah, I do. So everything that I do is a done with you service. So to not for people who are like, I just want somebody to be there next to me to say yes or no, move with me. I got you, right? Like, I'm not going to hand you a spreadsheet and say like, good luck, because we've all been on Pinterest or Google and we're like, small business spreadsheet, and then like try to make that fit into our business. So what I offer is a done with you services. I have those mini sessions, but then I do one-on-one containers, and we start at least 3 months. And you can either do 3 sessions a month if you're like, let's get to it. 2 sessions a month if you're like, okay, I want some time to like really implement and move. Or 1 session a month where it's like, take it slow, right? Like I really want to like ease into this. So that's my one-on-one consulting container.
That's awesome. I love that it's customized too, because I know for some people, money can be so triggering and like just stressful. So to have to jump into 3 sessions and be like, oh my gosh, I got to do this, this, and this. It's like, it could feel like a lot. So I love that.
Yeah. I want to move at people's pace, and just knowing that like it's shame-free, judgment-free. Like I've seen it all. So in a container that, just feels like a nice little warm hug from your money.
Yeah, I like that. And you have a free gift that I'm going to put in the show notes below too, right? That talks about that value-based spending.
Yes.
Is that right?
It is. Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah. When we touched on it a little bit, but again, just like understanding, is our money supporting us in a way that just feels really good? Or is money just floating about all over the place and it feels scattered, right? Like we want to get it to a place where it feels really good. And so that, that guide will kind of walk you through just kind of some eye-opening pieces of like, huh, I am spending money or I'm not spending money in places that I really value.
Yeah, that align with me. Well,
Yeah.
awesome. I'm excited to give that to them below because it walks them through their spending a little bit as well too.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. And where can people find you?
I'm most findable on Instagram _ Melissa Mitt. And then, of course, on my website, melissamitt.com.
Perfect. Well, this has been great. I'm so excited for people to just hear some tidbits of, information about their finances. I think for even people that are watching this, if they're not quite ready to work with you, they could start with your guide or even just, start looking at, like you said, maybe their statements and getting an idea of like, what am I actually spending? What do I need to, support my household on a month-to-month basis and kind of bring some of
Yes.
that safety in. So
Mm-hmm.
I've loved this, but everyone go reach out to Melissa. If you don't have a financial planner or an accountant or something in business, like this will just provide you so much safety in a world where we're just constantly like, how do I make more money? So
Mm-hmm.
I've
Thank
loved
you very
this.
much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I love talking about money, and I love talking about money with somebody who it's like that mindset piece just like weaves in so naturally. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. And I always like to ask my guests right before we hop off if there's like one small tidbit of information or like a really good tip or something that you have for people that you always say. I know you've given so many, awesome tips throughout this whole thing, but just like a final statement or something about money and your expertise that you would love for people to know. Do you have
Can
anything
I
that
share
comes to mind?
two?
Yeah, I would love that.
Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna share two. First being, if you really are just in like a very first step of like, okay, how do I even start to wrap my brain around money and where my hangups are? Doing a money journal of even like you're opening your bank account and then as simple as a smiley face, a straight face, or a sad face. How did that feel when you got in there? If it's like, oh, that was easy, smiley face. Okay, then when you're spending money on something small, for example, like your cell phone bill, okay, how did that feel? And just kind of like go through some of these like normal money things, or you're opening up your profit and loss statement. How did that feel? Smiley face, medium, sad face, right? So then you can start to identify what are the pieces of money where you're like, that's easy. And what are the pieces of your money like, ugh, that does not
Yeah.
feel so easy. So that way you can start to identify instead of it just being this like, money's bad, right? You're like, let's really figure out which piece doesn't feel so great. And then the second thing that I want to say, nobody's bad with money. If you've got that inside of you somewhere, if that story is inside of you somewhere, money is not an innate skill. We were not born with it. It is something that we have to put effort into. And so that story of I'm bad with money, let's figure out how we can flip that story to say I'm learning. I'm learning about money. This is a skill that I didn't have, and I'm taking steps forward.
I love that, like unlearning that story.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and there's steps you can take too to learn more and to feel confident with your money and to
Yeah.
make it easy. I think that was
Yes.
my favorite statement out of your bio. So
Oh, good.
that's awesome. Well, thank you so much. I love the journaling activity. I love the thought process of unlearning some of those stories, and this has been great. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening, everybody. I really appreciate it.